I love that music.
It's pretty hippie, right? So, awesome. Hey, thank you everyone for joining us today for our fifth Sochology session. My name is Mudassir Bangish, and we also have Amna Nazir, our technical director, with us today from Product Soch team. Before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. So for our participants, please keep your mics off during the session and type all your questions into the chat. We'll bring them up as the session progresses. So today's session topic is what is product marketing and how to do it well. And we're thrilled to have Martina join us today. Martina has spent nearly 30 years as a marketing and product leader. She started her career working on market-defining software, so Microsoft Office and Netscape Navigator. For those who don't know Navigator, that was the OG browser I remember when Explorer was absolutely terrible and kind of still is a bit. She teaches what she's learned with Silicon Valley Product Group, and she's also a lecturer at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Engineering. As a partner at Costanoa Ventures, it's a venture capital firm for early stage startups. She sits on multiple boards and coaches startups. She's also the author of Loved, How to Rethink Marketing Tech Products. Martina holds a BA in political science and MA in organizational behavior from Stanford University. She's a native Californian, mother of two, and a proud wife to Chris. Martina, a very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us so early on the West Coast. We're excited and honored to have you on, and really look forward to learning from your experience about product marketing. So please take it away.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. And as Mudassir said, this is live, which means if you have questions as we're going along, this is not intended to just be me presenting at everybody. We invite questions to come all along the way. Just type them in. So if anything that I'm saying you have a question about, please feel free to just dive in. We want this to be about what is helping you learn more about product marketing and how to do it well. So as Mudassir said, I had the great gift of starting my product management career at Microsoft. I was a product manager first on the Microsoft Word team before I eventually moved over to Office. So this is a picture of me in the early stage of my career, which I know many of you are at. And when I was a product manager for Microsoft Word, there was a moment where we got this executive edict from on high saying that every new product version had to simultaneously release with the next coming version of Windows. And at the time, this was going to cut our development time in half. And this was at a time where we did not have agile development cycles. The amount of time you had determined how many features you could release. And it was also an era in which a product was judged purely by the number of features it had. It wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, where people use technology every day and they have a lot of experience with products. So we were basically going to have half the number of features, and yet we had to market this version of Word as being vastly superior to the one that had preceded it, which PS had the most number of features we'd ever produced. We literally stuck a sticker on the box saying over 150 features. So we put the product management team and the product marketing team put our heads together and basically posed that challenge, which is how might we position this product such that it can be perceived as having disproportionate value despite the fact that it has half the features of its prior version. And a product marketer basically took out this study, which had examined every keystroke of every user, be they a beginner or an advanced user. And we discovered that the vast majority of keystrokes for any user fell into four really basic categories. Things like formatting and printing and file management. And when we looked at the features that we were able to do, they fell vastly into these four basic categories. And so we positioned what we were doing as being about what most users of Word valued the most. And this positioning of that smaller feature set as being squarely as the ones that the most users needed was what helped catapult it to be the most commercially successful and critically acclaimed version of Word at that time. So for those of you that are familiar with the now ubiquitous red squiggly line, all of those, I shouldn't say all, but many of those features came in that version, and they are iconic features that continue to be used by many products today. So that all started with that framing. Let's just use the product on the user's behalf for where they can value it most. And this really crafted version of how can the value of our product be perceived. This is at the heart of product marketing. So product marketing's purpose is to drive product adoption by shaping market perception through strategic marketing activities that meet business goals. So we didn't just come up with how the product should be shaped. We knew that we needed to bring that to the strongest influencers of the day. So that included press people and people who would write reviews, which had incredible sway at that point in time in terms of how people perceived a product. So we knew that that was a key part of how we might bring this product to market. And so it was the most strategic activity was to make sure the press understood our vantage point. And that's, again, driving towards those business goals. So why is this important? If you can't see a single thing on here, that's actually the point. This is the MarTech category map from this year, and it now has almost 10,000 players in it. Now, whatever software category you are in a crowded marketplace or one that is rapidly becoming more crowded. If you are producing something that is, or on a product that is a mobile app that competes in the App Store, you have 5.5 million other apps that you're competing with to be discovered and found. If you think about any category, numbers, the difference between number 5 and number 15 or number 35 is practically indistinguishable for most consumers. And they're trying to make decisions based on, well, does this picture compel me because I can see the difference? Everything that they talk about might sound very similar and the same. So this is why product marketing and bringing clear shape to all the things that help bring a product to market has become more important than ever. It's because specifically, every single market that everybody is in is crowded, and it's incumbent on us to help customers be able to draw distinctions between these products, and it's not easy. So a myth I want to dispel for all of you, since I know many of you are coming at this from the product perspective, is that good marketing requires good marketers. I will say, as someone that has spent much of my career on the marketing side, if you have a great marketer, it's an enormous difference maker in your business. However, there is not enough product marketing talent in the world to cover all the product marketing need, especially in countries outside of the United States. There just isn't the same depth of experience. So people don't know what the practice is going to be. And so the truth is, product people can do great product marketing. And actually, it winds up being product teams and product managers that will wind up doing a lot of the lifting around product marketing when the position doesn't exist, or if you're in a company where there isn't a lot of maturity in how the product marketing function gets practiced. So that's why knowing and understanding these things is really important to anyone that has a product background. Now you might be thinking, oh my God, I already have way too much on my plate to do. Why are you saying I actually need to do more? Isn't that what my marketing people are for? And I want to frame product marketing specifically, that practice is really being two sides of the same coin. And ultimately, I mean, you'll understand it's a huge job, it's an enormous responsibility, but you take the same foundational elements. The product management and the building of the product becomes one side where you're manifesting all of this knowledge of market and customer in how you build a product. And ultimately, the product marketer is one that takes that same depth of product knowledge and market knowledge and manifests it in how the product goes to market and enabling all the teams on the go-to-market side. But the core skill set, the deep product knowledge, the deep customer knowledge, the deep market knowledge, that's required for both roles to succeed. And that's also why if you are starting with a smaller team or a less experienced team, why it's crucial for product management to be highly involved in the development of all the things that product marketing is doing. So I'm going to give you 4 hacks, the 4 fundamentals that even if you don't carry the title of product marketer, if you're trying to help your company do this product marketing so your product can be adopted, these 4 fundamentals are the most important things for you to know and understand. So number 1 is to be an ambassador, connecting the customer and market insights. And I'll spend time on each one of these things individually. Number 2 is to be the strategist, which is to direct your product's go-to-market. Number 3 is to be a storyteller, which is to shape how the world thinks about your product. So it's not just talking about the product. And number 4, this is perhaps the most important in the modern customer journey, which is to enable others to tell your story. We can't assume people are always listening to the official marketing version of things. We have to presume that they're relying on others, their friends, their trusted resources, and whatever they find in Google to help direct them. All right, so let's double click into each one of these and what they might mean. Ambassador. So this is connecting customer and market insights, and I'll give you an example of what this can look like. So this is a company called Workiva. Their very first product was something called web filings, which is about as exciting as it sounds, but it was for SEC financial professionals to be able to file all of their official reports with the SEC. That's a big governmental body in the US. Every public company must do this. So it's a government requirement. It's regulated, and so it must be done in a very precise way. And it's utterly essential that all of the financial information being recorded in these reports is totally correct. So that financial professional is going to look at information from across the company. Now, when web filings was out there, they had a very strong customer success management team that worked every day with customers. And this customer success team heard from their customers again and again, the number one feature that we would like that would make us more productive is multi-screen support. So the customer success team took this to the product team and said, hey, we keep hearing that what customers want the most from us is multi-screen support. The product team had a lot of priorities. They were trying to do all these data integrations. They were trying to solve the jobs that could be done that weren't these flows that weren't quite working, that needed to be upgraded. So they heard this request and they said, that sounds like a nice to have. There are all these other things we're working on that we think are much more important priorities. So they didn't prioritize it. But thankfully, the customer success team said, hey, this is really important to our customers. We think it's essential to our market. We really have to make sure that we prioritize this. So the product team relented. They put it in the next major release. And sure enough, in that next major release, the most talked about feature was multi-screen support. And the reason was it had a disproportionate impact on the day-to-day productivity of users. And so they experienced the value of that one thing so much more than all these other things that were important, but weren't necessarily in the frame of their daily lives. So representing that customer insight, hey, this is really going to impact their productivity. They really want this more than anything from us. Recognizing what the market requires, which is it's not necessarily all the fancy things that we might think we need to do. It's actually something really simple. This is an example of being that ambassador between the customer and market insights to the product team. And then it also goes the other way, which is once that decision gets made, now how does it get communicated to the rest of the go-to-market team? Do we start this with the customer success team? Does it get messaged there first? Is it part of how, do we run a campaign against this? Do we need to train our field, our sales reps around this new feature? That's the preparing and then the ambassadorship of representing what happens on one side and making sure it makes it into the go-to-market side of how a company is going to market and how a product is getting brought to market. So that's what being an ambassador looks like, is wherever that intelligence comes from, that we're making sure it gets manifest in both sides, go-to-market and product. So what are some things that you could do on the product side? If you change nothing, how do you use market thinking in product process? Well, the very first thing I always advocate is if you have product marketers, make sure they are embedded in your product teams so that they can bring that customer market insight in. If you don't yet have product marketers, and so it's you who's doing that, make sure you're asking yourselves as you're making product prioritization decisions, how might this be perceived by our customers? What are some of the market drivers that might make decision X better than decision Y, or why we might prioritize a group of features now versus later? What are some of the market things that can be wind at our back? if product teams ask themselves these questions as they're prioritizing their backlog, it naturally brings a more customer and market-centric view into that decision making.
Yeah.
So think about oh, yes.
Yeah, Martina, just had a question on this. So, when do you think is a good time to, in the development life cycle, to bring in kind of the product marketing team, right? I mean, I know I've been guilty of this. Unfortunately, sometimes, product marketing does become a bit of an afterthought where you're like, hey, we're kind of feature complete almost, and now we need to work with the cross-functional team, and that includes product marketing to kind of craft the message of what we're putting out, right? So in your experience, like what is kind of the sweet spot in the development cycle that you think is a good time to introduce the product marketing team?
Well, in agile market in teams that work with these agile development cycles, this is why I recommend embedding, because they should always be there. They should always be a core part of the team that's helping to make and drive decisions. If you have weekly stand-ups or whatever it is, whenever you are making those decisions, that voice can be present. Their teams are structured in different ways. Sometimes you might have someone from customer research that can represent some of that. So whatever the structure is for your organization, you actually want that intelligence to be present as the product team is making decisions. So an example there, at Mudassir, that word example that I gave you, had we not been brought in right when the executive decision had been made, so before any of the features had been coded, we would not have had enough runway to do that product positioning that was so essential. We had to do some research. We had to understand the implications. We had to do a tremendous amount of preparation. So how the go-to-market teams work in their cycle, actually most people on the product teams don't necessarily understand how much lead time might be required to do that positioning and marketing work successfully. So as early as possible, but ideally they're embedded. You might make different decisions based on them being there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So to that last point, encourage discussion. So if you have people that are representing more of that market and customer side, you want to bring them in, because you might, again, as we were just talking about this, you might make different decisions based on what they represent. So when I was at Microsoft, again, this was not agile development cycles, but we had a group that was getting together every single week. That was documentation, the equivalent of customer success, product marketing, product management, engineering lead. It was the team all together, always representing their vantage points so that we could make sure that we were making decisions, understanding all of their implications on all sides. And it was enormous in making sure not just that we were staying aligned, but that we had great confidence in the decisions that we were making, that it could lead to the product's ultimate success. So that's what you're looking for. Fundamental number 2, strategist. So it's easy word to say. What does this actually mean? So as it relates to a product, really the way I like to describe this is everybody has to have the same unified picture that we are building toward. Every product is its own unique puzzle. You can do all the same things as a company that looks just like you, but because of your combination of product, market circumstance, and team, it's all going to wind up a little bit different. So we know that we're all our unique, wonderful puzzles. So it's really important that everybody have the same picture that people are building toward, so that people can make decisions and have it still be aligned toward where you want to go. So you want to have that unified picture so everyone understands this is where we're trying to go. And then you ideally want to put in place the edge pieces so that it's easier for others to contribute their piece. So here's an example of what this looks like. Typically, teams think about, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Why are we going to do it? And when? So the number of lists of here's what we're doing on the marketing side I get to see from companies I work with. I'm like, all right, we actually need to turn this upside down to make it market aware. For it to be strategic from a marketing perspective and from a market perspective, we actually want to flip this on its head. We want to think about when. If we think about our customer and what they're doing and what's happening in the market, there are natural opportunities where we're going to have wind at our back. We're doing exactly the same thing, will be heard better, or there's just more alignment in what's happening that people can see and understand our perspective. So when becomes extremely important in crafting strategy that's market aware. Then why? Why are we doing this? Is this to fill our funnel? Is this to create awareness? Is this to help shape the category? Because the why then is determining the what. Based on your answer to those why questions, that will determine, well, do we invest in digital campaigns, or do we try and do this via PR? And then you figure out the how. So that more strategic vantage point requires that inversion of how many people think of the quote unquote classic marketing activities that they think they want to do. So encouraging you to think that through a little differently for it to be more market aware and strategic.
Right.
And well, yes, go ahead.
Just a comment on the when. I think people underestimate how powerful that is, right? Like we've seen a ton of companies, they're just not in the right time, I guess I would say, right? And then when you go to the why, and it's like, okay, well, why now? Which kind of takes you back to the when, because you're really just trying to put that in now, right? So yeah, I think it's really powerful. I think something that's missed. So that's great insight.
And I'll also say most product teams or people that come from a product background, when we are done, then
Right.
we do the marketing. And so it's very much like when, let's see, we're going to be done December 24th.
That's
And,
right.
and so then it's going to be ready. It's like, worst time ever to do anything. You've got a dead zone from December 18th till January 4th for the majority of the world. So don't even bother. If that's when it's done, or that's when it's going to be done, let's rethink this. Let's target January 17th or 18th, where it's outside of all holiday windows. We'll have enough time to build up some momentum to train people. And then that very same product being done is going to have way more market wind at its back. And so that's very much an old habit that we need to break. When it's not just when we are done with the product.
Awesome.
All right. So how might you actually do this inside an organization? So we're not going to spend a ton of time on this. I know it's too small. My book Love covers this in much more detail. But this is an example of a go-to-market puzzle picture with the edge pieces in place. That's what the time frame on the top is, the customer's environment. The strategies are over there on the left side, and you build from the outside edges in. This is something that clarifies the picture for everyone so that they know, why are we doing things? When are we doing things? Why are we doing it? And it helps you identify where you might have gaps. Gosh, we're doing absolutely nothing in Q4, yet it's a huge time in which our customers have budget that they're trying to spend. So that's an example of how you bring all those things together. All right, Storyteller. So this is fundamental number 3. So I mentioned that example in Word where we tried to actually shape how everyone was perceiving the value of the product. And this is a recreation of what we did to actually help people understand the story that we wanted them to understand. We could have done this as a fancy PowerPoint. And of course, being at Microsoft, everything was done in PowerPoint. We wanted people to listen in a different way, because the moment you go into presentation mode, people are like, oh, okay, I'm getting all the marketing schlock, so I'm just going to tune out till we get to the product demo. We didn't want them to get there because we're like, we need them to lean in and listen to what we're saying in a different way. So we would draw this on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, whatever it took, because then it made it feel like a conversation. Let me let you in to this secret world of knowledge that only we have at Microsoft, because we are the only ones that have this data. And here's what we learned. Now you know it. And we would describe this. I'm going to pull out my little presenter tool here. I get a little fancy pointer. So you see these little, so the way this works is, this is how often someone would do something. And this is how much a feature was used if it was discovered. And so you see here, like 75% of this is like huge. Everyone uses it and everyone discovers it. These little bumps are things that not as many people discovered, but if they discover them, they use them a lot. So again, it might be surprising to know that a lot of people forgot to click the spell check button, even though it was right there in the middle. Same thing with bullets. People, again, it was right there in the middle of the ribbon and people would not see it. Those that discovered it use it all the time. So what we did was we would take these little bumps and we would move them into the big bump. And this is how we would describe how we made decisions about how we improved what was going to be most valued by most users. So it gave a very specific context, and it gave them data that helped them understand and we weren't just presenting at them, we let them in on how we were thinking so it could really stick. So storytelling isn't just, oh, what are the magical words, the messaging or positioning? It's also sometimes the how in which you're telling the story so people can understand and agree with the point of view you're trying to get out into market. Here's another core part of storytelling, which is the messaging and the positioning of the product. This is, again, bread and butter stuff for product marketing. And product people always have to be involved in doing this. This is particularly true if you're a very technical product. The more technical, the more it's going to lean very heavily on product teams to make sure that it accurately reflects what an audience needs to hear. So this is an example. I'll blow this up so it's a little bigger so you can see it. Two companies at the exact same point in time in the BI space and how they talked about themselves. Company A is the best tool for running a data-driven online business. Data-driven decisions lead to better results. It's nice and tight, which a lot of people think like, oh, it's marketing, we want to keep it short. But it also has lost all of its meaning. This could be any tool. This could be Microsoft Excel. It's saying something that's true. Data-driven decisions lead to better results. But is that something that helps me understand what this product does or why it's better? Now let's contrast that to company B. It reinvents business intelligence. So they're telling us right up front, we're going to try and do something really different. Our modern data discovery platform takes a markedly different approach to analytics because it operates in database. All your data is inherently drillable and explorable. Even if you are not an analyst, you already now understand what it's doing that is different. If you are an analyst, which they were trying to mark, they are basically saying, we're going to message to the people who are using the product so they understand right up front what makes it different. You understand if this is in database, it's going to be much faster. I can understand why it's drillable and explorable. It makes sense to me. I can process this vantage point for myself. I understand the point of view. It makes me curious. I want to learn more. So between these two, Company A had a totally mediocre outcome. Company B was acquired for billions by Google. One was Looker, one was RJ Metrics. So when you think about messaging, which all of us have a role in, be you product or on the marketing side, what is good and strong is extremely relative to who your market is and where you are in its category maturity. If it's early, you're going to message one way. If it's really mature, you're going to message another. So understanding that and building that into how you message is absolutely crucial. Also thinking through, oh, yes.
Please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, positioning and messaging are different things. Messaging is the thing that you say about your product, but positioning is the combination of all of the things that you do, including your messaging. But it's all of those behaviors that ultimately position a product over time. So, good to see you. You got a question?
Yeah, I think my question, I think it touches more on the messaging portion, right? Like as product leaders, our instinct is, this will provide X value, right? This feature will provide X value or will solve X problem. And like how important is it to get like super specific about what challenge is trying to solve, right? Like, I mean, if we look at this example, all your data is inherently drillable and explorable. It is a bit vague, but I guess it kind of communicates a bit of the value, not exactly what you're able to do. So how do you strike that balance between, you spend all this time building this product, providing that statement that accurately describes the value that the end user is going to get?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And it's unfortunately, there isn't a neat formula that I can say, like, well, if you're at X, you do Y. And I would say messaging for most companies is best developed just like a product where it's iterative and you do a lot to try and understand what is it that our customers can hear and what are they trying to understand that helps them make thoughtful decisions. One of the big things that has shifted in modern customer journeys is they will rapidly go from like web page to web page to web page to web page, trying processing things as quickly as possible. So the role that messaging plays in that decision process, who do I pay attention to? Who do I drill into? You need to think about messaging as kind of a layer cake. At the top level, what is it that's going to get them, what's going to help them understand what's different enough that they want to dive in more? Part of the challenge you're describing with us here is we try to put too much, we try and kitchen sink that upfront message. Let's try and put all this stuff, this cool, interesting stuff that's totally different, as opposed to let's describe more simply what our objective was that was going to be different in the approach of the product. So people go like, oh, that's interesting. And then invite them into the details. And there's, again, the more technical the product, the more it tends to be. It's kind of a high-low where I am describing enough to make me curious because I can see why this might be different. That's what the Looker version did. It's not super technically detailed, but it's enough to make me say like, oh, there's something interesting there. Let me learn more. And then it goes deep. They describe exactly what they were doing. You could understand like what is the product architecture that enables this difference to be more performant or to be easier to connect to. So there's the moment you invite someone at that top layer to dive in, you want to give them a lot of the detail, but you don't want to overload that invitation with so much detail that they're overwhelmed, they don't process, and they can't see what is fundamentally different about your approach. So I know that's a lot, but is that starting to kind of answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, from what I gather, I think it is a delicate balance, right? Like I've seen both ends of that spectrum. And to your point, like I think our attention spans are getting less and less, and we just tend to tune out. 10, 15 seconds in, if I don't understand how this is providing value, or I just end up closing. Whether it's a video, I mean, I think most people are consuming a story through that format now as well, right? Which I think makes things even more difficult. You can't just kind of toss a blob of text on your website anymore and expect people to kind of understand what you're trying to communicate. So
Yeah, and video is a great point, which is I'm a huge fan of video, and a lot of people like to consume it that way. But for them to click on the video, there needs to be enough for them to decide to click. So,
right.
and you want to test these things and understand like what was understood. And I do feel I see this all the time in working with companies as they're building their messaging.
Yeah.
There's a lot of we assume a lot about what people understand or we assume they understand what we mean. So just yesterday, I worked with two different people. One person, in both cases, the head of product was there. And as we were talking about things out loud to one another and describing how we felt things, they were describing how they felt they were different as a product. It was way more clear than what was at the upfront in their websites. Their websites were describing category. Their websites were saying, we're blank, blank, blank platform, both. And I was like, okay, let's drop the word platform. Let's do a better job of trying to say exactly what we mean. And that's a huge hack, by the way. Have a conversation with somebody, describe it, and inevitably, how you are describing it in person out loud is going to be better than what you would write. There is a bit that flips in our brain. Kind of, we get into academic mode. Oh, I'm now in marketing mode, and we just try and use all this marketing language, which is, I'm a marketer. I can say this. It's the worst. It's not clarifying. It's not helpful. And so the more we can move to simpler language that's still very clear, it doesn't diminish its effectiveness. It actually has the opposite effect. So
Yeah.
okay, good messaging is really hard to do.
Yeah. I think it also relates to what you said earlier is your messaging should be iterative, just like your product, right? And that just kind of triggers something in my mind. Like you should test, and what you just said, you should test and continually evolve your messaging as you're evolving your product, right? And not have it be that afterthought that you're just handing off to kind of the marketing team, right? So that's
100%.
awesome.
And I guarantee if that's how it's done, it will not be as good as it could be. Is it going to be good enough? Probably, but you actually won't tap into great. by doing it that way.
Got
I'll give you an example from a company I worked with where the CEO fell in love with how he wanted to describe the product. The marketing team didn't like it that much, but they're like, okay, it's the CEO, so let's do a variation on a theme that they were trying to move towards where they thought thought it should be. And then they asked the head of sales, how are you describing this to customers? And the head of sales guy's way was pretty basic, but very easy to understand. And
Mhm.
they didn't use any platform. They didn't get super fancy. They took each one of these statements, they put it on their website, and they had a learn more button as the indicator of people's degree of interest and their willingness to lean in. And the head of sales version outperformed the CEO's version by 1,000%.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it was like there's no contest. And
That's great.
so it was great because the CEO just said, okay, well, I will obviously not keep insisting on my way, and we're going to go with the sales way. And the marketing team also was surprised because the sales way didn't have like that marketing sparkle. It didn't have, it wasn't sexy, but it was very easy and to understand. And that's what made people want to click learn more. And that's what we're trying to do. So it's counterintuitive, but there are many ways to test it. And there are many people that make the mistake of falling in love with how they like things to sound, as opposed to listening to what actually makes the most sense to people.
Super interesting stuff.
All right. So Storyteller, there's so much there. So some of the things that you can do on the product side, and we're talking about exactly this, which is you need to get it right for the right audience. Again, what's the customer journey and where does this live? Is it in a sales presentation? Is it on the website? There's some that should be the same. There's some that should be different. These are different mediums at different parts of the customer journey. We'll have a tendency to say, okay, this is the decided upon messaging. It should be the same everywhere. Some of it, yes. But then we need to get hyper specific based on how something is being used. So, right message, right audience. And it's about what people want to hear. That's what we were just talking about. And then, of course, to iterate and test before finalizing. If people created this in a room and they think, this is great, it is not as good as it can be. The fourth fundamental is about evangelism. And this is not about you being an evangelist as much as it is about thinking through what will it take for us to enable others to evangelize on our behalf. And back, the very first product that I was a lead on was Word for the Macintosh. And we produced a version that was just a dog from a performance perspective. It was filled with features. And so it was slow as molasses on most people's computer. And so we're like, we have to do an interim release that's fixing some of these problems. Now, the people that were most critical of the product were people in press. And the people in the press who were extremely influential at that time, I won't surprise you to hear that they used word count as a feature more than any other. It was they're writing articles, they're doing the word count multiple times for every article. So it was their bellwether feature for how they measured a product's performance. And so we realized this and said, it's way out there on the long tail in terms of usage, but it is super important to our most influential users. And so we dedicated our number one engineer, like the lead, and we said, you need to make word count faster. And I don't know how he did it, but he found a way to make it not just faster, but the fastest it had ever been. It was even faster than the Windows version, which was a huge win. And we're like, whoa. So of course, when we released it, that was what people were looking at as an indicator of performance. And so all of the write-ups in that interim release were like, oh, it looks like they've addressed some of the most important performance issues. This was an example of us understanding for the evangelist important in our business. This was a critical thing to nail for them to evangelize on our behalf. And so that's what this means. How do you get others to talk about your product so that it's not just you doing all the heavy lifting? In modern customer journeys, that is super important. And so it becomes really critical for you to think about and do that. So this is just an example I pulled off the interweb. So I won't belabor it other than to say, like, look at this journey and describes what's happening emotionally, the thoughts and feelings, the phases of the journey. If I think about most customer journeys that I see, it focuses on this bottom part, which are the phases: inquiry, comparison, purchase, installation, and not on these parts, which is, how is this person feeling? What is their emotional experience? Where are they going as a result of one thing versus another? And these are the types of things we want to pay attention to, because that's where they're seeking guidance and influence. Where are they turning to? Is it their friends? Is it G2? Is it forums? Is it a Reddit? Is it a repo? Where do they go? What are their watering holes for where they seek advice and guidance to go through what is always a challenging decision process? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just, oh, I read 5 reviews and then I make a decision. Boom. We got to understand that, because that helps us understand, where do we create influence? How do we enable it? This is a place where, on the product side, you might have the least amount of direct influence, but you want to be thinking about this on the product side for, what do we need to build into the product to make sure that this influence loop is possible? If we build a product where nothing is worthy of talking about in the modern era, that's not going to be enough. We have to think about, what will people talk about? What will make them so excited that they will tell a friend, that they will advocate on this product's behalf? That's what product teams need to think through. And then that can go to the go-to-market teams. So what does this mean for you on the product side? You want to be collaborating and iterating massively with everyone on the go-to-market side. If you don't have an embedded product marketer, you're going to have to represent a tremendous amount of this thinking as it relates to the go-to-market teams. But as we were talking about earlier, this is a place where you break down barriers and you just iterate and you figure it out, and you don't be precious about, like, well, who's supposed to come up with that magical way of saying this, and what are the magical things that we're supposed to do? You try things and you iterate on them. The go-to-market side is as iterative these days as the product side. And if it's not, that's something you might want to talk about with your teams and say, should we be doing some things differently? Should we be a little more dynamic, or testing and experimenting in how we do things on the go-to-market side? And I love this picture, because this is my favorite, like, tag team. They didn't get to choose who their coworkers were, but if you think about Han Solo as being like the sales maverick, and Chewie being the operations guy, making sure everything's working. That can be legal. That can just be your ops people making sure the site is live. And Obi-Wan Kenobi is being the sage engineering product side. And Luke Skywalker is being that product marketer, or the product marketing thinking that's trying to take the best from all of these worlds and use all those superpowers on behalf of achieving the mission, which is whatever your business wants and however you want your product to be adopted. So collaborate and iterate. And use these 4 fundamentals as the tools. And just think, if all you do differently is think through, how might I apply these and how I do my job as a product manager, you will have a more market-ready product for the go-to-market teams. So thinking through that ambassadorship, customer market insights, being a strategist, when's the right time for this to be out there in market? Storyteller, what's the right message for the right time for the right audience we're trying to reach? And evangelist, how can we build things that will enable others to evangelize on our product's behalf? And with that, I leave you with, when I let go of what I am is when I become what I might be. If any of this was of interest to you, I talk about a whole lot more of it in my book, Loved. And that's it for the official stuff. So I'd love to and welcome more questions.
Awesome. Okay, so we got one very specific question. I'll kind of display that. Let me see if you see that. How do you think generated AI products like ChatGPT will change the product marketing space, especially on the content generation side? So we're seeing more and more of that. I mean, like, AIs are basically writing stories on themselves. You just give them a couple of keywords and they're able to generate kind of whatever you want them to. So just wondering if you have any insight on that. That's from Abdul.
Yeah, great question. And I would say it's too early to tell. That being said, when I think about the content that is most productive, most successful, gets read and shared, that's never going to be something that's just generated by an AI. It might create a framing that is SEO centric, that has all these great keywords, But for something to stand out in market, it needs to have point of view. And AI can't generate point of view, something that feels that human aspect that makes it pop off the page. That's something that the best content will always need. Also, that high-low part that I was mentioning, it might be really great for some of the low being like, this is pure product content that's like super technical in detail, and we're just trying to make that available and more visible. That's where I can see it playing more of a role than sort of lead content that you're really trying to build as an asset and promote.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. We got more questions coming in. Let's see. First one. Actually, that looks like that's been cut off. Here's one. So, do PMMs drive voice of customer programs as well, gather feedback from customers, G2, and also consolidate insights from sales, CSMs, etc.? So that's a
Yes.
question from.
The short answer is yes. It might not exclusively be the role of product marketing, but product marketers absolutely can't do their jobs without somebody doing that. So if someone isn't, then it is product marketing's job. In early stage companies, almost always the product marketer is driving that.
Okay. I guess what is the gathering feedback from customers? What does that look like? I mean, from a product standpoint, we have those kind of one-on-one customer calls. What does that look like for a PMM, if you can enlighten us?
It's no different. And I would actually say some of this depends on the stage of company and where they are. Earlier stage companies is exactly the same, because you actually want to hear the nuance of how does this product get talked about? What are the other things people are bringing in? Because that helps you bring shape to, is what I'm saying on the marketing side going to be meaningful, because I'm understanding their context. So a product marketer needs all the same background for that customer conversation. How the product teams can infuse some of it with a little more market knowledge, asking questions like, how might you describe what we talked about to a colleague? Relative to the last thing that you actually got dedicated budget for, where would you rate this as an order of importance or desirability? So you want to get a sense of relative value to things they've actually paid for, and then how would they describe it using their own words? Those are huge things to understand from a marketing perspective. And if the product team doesn't do that, then the product marketer needs to ask those questions. That's what they need to be able to do their job.
Okay, gotcha. We got one more question from Hot there. It's a bit of a long one. So, how do you motivate leadership to invest in PMMs if they don't have one today? They think in terms of numbers. So, what focal metrics do we pitch that'll change that?
So this is one of the biggest challenges of product marketing, is they can't be associated in the same way that if I hire a sales rep, I'm getting this much quota. If I have a product manager, I can enable this much more product velocity. You can't say, well, if you have a product marketer, you will suddenly be able to do blah. So the argument for it is, if sales isn't reaching what you believe their potential is, and product is producing, but we don't feel like the product is reaching its intended goals, that the closing of that gap, that's product marketing. That is squarely product marketing, because sales will say like, well, we don't have a product that's as sellable, or we don't have enough leads coming from marketing. Product's going to say, well, we've got this velocity. Intersecting and understanding all of that by understanding, well, what our customers actually believe, what's actually happening in the market, what's the competition doing. That's all product marketing. So it's figuring out the puzzle, unpacking, and then helping to direct, and then message well and appropriately based on things. That's all product marketing. So it's kind of like, it's the missing link if things aren't quite working the way they should.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I think that's it for questions. We're almost at time as well. So Martina, on behalf of the Product Soch team and the product community, we all want to thank you very much for this educative session. It would be awesome to have you on again. Perhaps you could talk about the different early stage startups that you support and how they've successfully approached product marketing. So that would be great. Yeah, but before we leave, I'd just like to take this opportunity to make a couple of quick announcements. So we've got a lot more Sochology sessions. So make sure you're following the Product Soch LinkedIn page so you don't miss the registration for those. Also, check out our YouTube channel with the same name. That's Product Soch. We've got a growing collection of some really important talks and topics for aspiring and existing product leaders, such as how to break into product management, challenges in building disruptive products in South Asian region, and much more. In fact, our last conversation was with Fahad, who's a product manager at Google. So, Martina, thank you again so much, and for all of you for joining us. And yeah, hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.